My name is Alina, and I'm 28 years old. I live in a small town nestled in the heart of Maine, where the scent of pine hangs heavy in the air and the rhythm of life moves at a more deliberate pace. For most of my life, I've been a librarian, surrounded by the comforting silence of books and the quiet hum of knowledge. It's a peaceful existence, one that suits my introverted nature. I've always been more comfortable in the company of fictional characters than real people, finding solace and adventure within the pages of well-worn novels. My family, on the other hand, is anything but quiet. We're a boisterous bunch, prone to loud arguments, passionate opinions, and an unwavering loyalty to each other. Or, at least, that's how it used to be. My parents, bless their hearts, are salt-of-the-earth types. Dad is a retired carpenter, his hands calloused and strong, capable of building anything from a sturdy bookshelf to a charming birdhouse. Mom is a baker, her kitchen always filled with the warm aroma of cinnamon rolls and apple pies. They instilled in me a strong sense of right and wrong, the importance of hard work, and the value of family. I have one sibling, my older brother, Daniel. He's the golden child, the one who always excelled at everything he tried. He was a star athlete in high school, a brilliant student in college, and now he's a successful lawyer in the city. He's everything I'm not: outgoing, charismatic, and ambitious. We've always had a complicated relationship, a mix of love, admiration, and a healthy dose of sibling rivalry. Despite our differences, we were always there for each other, bound by the shared history and unspoken understanding that comes with being family. Until recently. Our world began to crumble when our grandmother, Nana Rose, passed away. She was the glue that held our family together, the matriarch who always had a listening ear, a warm hug, and a pot of tea brewing on the stove. Her house was a haven, a place where we could all gather and forget about the stresses of our lives. Nana Rose was more than just a grandmother. She was a confidant, a friend, and the heart of our family. Her death left a void that seemed impossible to fill. But the real trouble started with the reading of the will. Nana Rose, it turned out, had a considerable estate, accumulated over a lifetime of hard work and careful saving. There was the house, of course, filled with antique furniture and cherished memories. There were also stocks, bonds, and a significant amount of cash. The will stipulated that the estate was to be divided equally between my brother and me. My parents were provided for separately, a comfortable trust fund that would ensure their financial security. At first, everything seemed fair and equitable. Daniel and I discussed our plans, agreeing to sell the house and split the proceeds. We talked about investing the money wisely, ensuring that Nana Rose's legacy would continue to benefit our family for years to come. But then, things started to change. Daniel, fueled by his ambition and his innate sense of entitlement, began to see the inheritance as an opportunity to climb even higher on the corporate ladder. He started making suggestions, subtle at first, about how he should receive a larger share of the inheritance. He argued that he was better equipped to manage the money, that he had more experience with investments, and that he could generate a higher return. I resisted, reminding him of Nana Rose's wishes for an equal division. I pointed out that I had my own plans for the money, dreams of starting a small bookstore, a cozy haven where I could share my love of literature with others. But Daniel wouldn't listen. He became increasingly insistent, his arguments growing more forceful and his tone more condescending. He started to belittle my dreams, dismissing my bookstore idea as a frivolous hobby, a waste of money. He accused me of being naive and irresponsible, incapable of handling such a large sum of money. The tension between us grew thicker with each passing day, poisoning our relationship and driving a wedge between us. My parents, caught in the middle, tried to mediate, but their efforts were futile. Daniel was consumed by his greed, blinded by his ambition. He saw the inheritance as his due, a reward for his success, and he was determined to get his way, no matter the cost. And then he crossed the line. He started spreading rumors about me, telling family members that I was mentally unstable, that I had a gambling problem, that I was incapable of managing my own finances. He painted me as an irresponsible spendthrift, someone who would squander the inheritance on frivolous purchases and reckless investments. His lies were insidious, designed to undermine my credibility and turn our family against me. And they worked. Family members started to distance themselves from me, their expressions wary, their conversations guarded. I felt isolated and betrayed, as if I were an outcast in my own family. The pain of Daniel's betrayal cut deep, shattering my trust and leaving me feeling lost and alone. He had always been competitive, but I never imagined he was capable of such cruelty. I was heartbroken, not just by the loss of the inheritance, but by the loss of my brother. The man I had loved and admired had transformed into a selfish, manipulative stranger. As Daniel's lies continued to spread, I realized that I couldn't let him get away with it. I had to fight back, not just for the inheritance, but for my reputation and my dignity. I had to prove to my family that I was not the irresponsible spendthrift Daniel had portrayed me to be. I had to show them that I was worthy of their trust and respect. But how could I compete with Daniel's wealth and influence? He had the resources to hire lawyers, to spread propaganda, to manipulate the narrative. I was just a small-town librarian, armed with nothing but my wit and my determination. The task seemed daunting, almost impossible, but I refused to give up. I knew that Nana Rose would have wanted me to fight for what was right. She had always taught me to stand up for myself, to never let anyone take advantage of me. And so I decided to embark on a journey of revenge, a quest to expose Daniel's lies and reclaim my inheritance. But I knew that I couldn't do it alone. I needed allies, people who believed in me and were willing to help me fight back. But who could I trust? Who would stand by me against my own brother? My first instinct was to confide in my parents. They had always been my rock, my source of strength and support, but I hesitated. They were already devastated by Nana Rose's death and torn apart by the conflict between Daniel and me. I didn't want to burden them further, to add to their pain and stress. Besides, I knew that they would try to mediate, to find a compromise that would appease both Daniel and me. But I didn't want a compromise. I wanted justice. I wanted Daniel to be held accountable for his lies and his betrayal. And so, I decided to seek help elsewhere. I thought about my friends, the loyal and supportive women who had been by my side through thick and thin. But they were all ordinary people with ordinary lives. They didn't have the resources or the connections to take on someone like Daniel. I needed someone with expertise, someone who understood the intricacies of the law and the art of persuasion. I needed a lawyer, but lawyers were expensive, and I didn't have much money. I had been living frugally, saving every penny I could for my bookstore. But it wasn't enough to cover the cost of a lengthy legal battle. I was starting to feel discouraged, as if my quest for revenge was doomed before it even began. But then, I remembered Aunt Carol. She was Nana Rose's younger sister, a sharp-witted and independent woman who had always marched to the beat of her own drum. She had worked as a private investigator for many years, solving complex cases and exposing hidden truths. She was retired now, living in a small apartment in the city, but I knew that she still had her connections and her skills. I hadn't seen Aunt Carol in years, but I remembered her fondly. She had always been kind to me, encouraging my love of reading and sharing her own adventurous stories. I decided to call her. I found her number in my old address book and dialed it with trembling fingers. After a few rings, she answered, her voice raspy but familiar. "Hello." I took a deep breath and introduced myself. "Aunt Carol, it's Eleanor, Nana Rose's granddaughter." There was a moment of silence, and then her voice brightened. "Eleanor, my dear, it's so good to hear from you. How are you doing?" I told her about Nana Rose's death, about the inheritance, and about Daniel's betrayal. I poured out my heart, sharing my anger, my frustration, and my determination to fight back. Aunt Carol listened patiently, offering words of comfort and support. When I finished, she said, "Eleanor, I'm so sorry for your loss and for what you're going through. Daniel's behavior is despicable. You have every right to be angry and to seek justice." "But I don't know where to start," I said, my voice filled with despair. "I'm just a librarian. I don't know anything about law or investigations." "Don't worry, dear," Aunt Carol said. "I'm here to help. I may be retired, but I still have a few tricks up my sleeve. Tell me everything and we'll figure out a plan." And so, I spent the next few hours talking to Aunt Carol, sharing every detail of my conflict with Daniel. She asked probing questions, taking notes and offering insights. By the end of the conversation, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had an ally, someone who believed in me and was willing to fight by my side. Aunt Carol agreed to help me investigate Daniel, to uncover the truth behind his lies and expose his manipulation. She warned me that it wouldn't be easy, that it would be a long and arduous process. But I was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. With Aunt Carol's help, I started to gather evidence to document Daniel's lies and his attempts to manipulate our family. We interviewed family members, friends, and colleagues, piecing together a picture of Daniel's true character. It wasn't a pretty sight. We discovered that Daniel had a history of bending the truth, of exaggerating his accomplishments and downplaying his failures. He had always been driven by ambition, willing to do whatever it took to get ahead, even if it meant hurting others. We also uncovered evidence that Daniel had been secretly siphoning money from Nana Rose's estate, using it to fund his lavish lifestyle and his risky investments. He had been betraying her trust for years, taking advantage of her generosity and her failing health. The more we investigated, the more disgusted I became. I couldn't believe that my own brother was capable of such deceit and manipulation. I felt a burning desire to expose him, to reveal his true character to our family and the world. But Aunt Carol cautioned me to be patient. She reminded me that we needed to gather irrefutable evidence to build a solid case that would stand up in court. We couldn't afford to make any mistakes. As we continued our investigation, Daniel became increasingly suspicious. He sensed that something was amiss, that I was up to something. He started to monitor my movements, to question my friends and family members. He even hired a private investigator to follow me, to try to uncover my plans. I felt like I was living in a spy movie, constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid of being caught. The stress was overwhelming, and I started to doubt myself. Was I doing the right thing? Was it worth all the trouble? Was I just making things worse? But then I would remember Nana Rose, her kind eyes, her warm smile, her unwavering belief in me. And I would find the strength to keep going. I knew that I had to fight for her legacy, to protect her memory from Daniel's lies and his greed. The investigation took months, but finally, we had enough evidence to confront Daniel. We had a mountain of documents, recordings, and testimonies that proved his deceit and his manipulation. We had uncovered his secret bank accounts, his hidden investments, and his lies about my mental health. We were ready to take him down. But how would we do it? Should we confront him directly, expose him to our family and friends? Or should we file a lawsuit, taking him to court and risking a lengthy and expensive legal battle? Aunt Carol and I debated the options for hours, weighing the pros and cons of each approach. Finally, we came to a decision. We would do both. We would confront Daniel privately, giving him a chance to confess and make amends. But if he refused, we would file a lawsuit, exposing his lies to the world. The next day, I called Daniel and asked him to meet me at Nana Rose's house. It was the place where we had spent so many happy memories, the place where our family had always gathered. I thought it would be a fitting location for our confrontation. He agreed, but his voice was wary. He knew that something was up. When I arrived at the house, Daniel was already there, pacing nervously. He greeted me with a forced smile, his eyes darting around the room. "What's this about, Alina?" he asked, his voice tight. "I'm busy, you know. I have important things to do." I took a deep breath and said, "Daniel, we need to talk about Nana Rose's inheritance." His face paled and he shifted uncomfortably. "What about it?" he asked. "Everything is being handled properly according to the will." "That's not true, Daniel," I said, my voice firm. "I know about your lies, I know about your manipulation, I know about the money you've been siphoning from the estate." He stared at me in disbelief, his eyes wide with fear. "What are you talking about?" he stammered. "You're crazy, you're making things up." "I have proof, Daniel," I said, pulling out a file filled with documents and recordings. "I have everything documented, your lies, your secret accounts, your attempts to manipulate our family." He lunged at me, trying to grab the file, but I dodged him. "Give me that," he shouted, his face contorted with rage. "You have no right to snoop into my affairs." "I have every right, Daniel," I said, holding the file out of his reach. "You betrayed our family, you betrayed Nana Rose. You need to be held accountable." I gave him a chance to confess, to apologize, to make amends, but he refused. He denied everything, accusing me of being jealous, of being vindictive, of trying to ruin his life. He was unrepentant, arrogant, and utterly devoid of remorse. As I looked at him, I realized that he was beyond redemption. He had become so consumed by his greed and his ambition that he had lost all sense of right and wrong. He was no longer the brother I had once loved and admired. He was a monster, and so I made a decision. I would fight him, not just for the inheritance, but for the soul of our family. I would expose his lies, reveal his true character, and bring him to justice. I walked out of the house, leaving him standing there, seething with rage. As I drove away, I knew that the battle had just begun, but I was ready. I had Aunt Carol by my side, I had the truth on my side, and I had the spirit of Nana Rose guiding me. Daniel had underestimated me. He thought I was just a quiet, bookish librarian incapable of standing up to him. But he was wrong. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I was determined to make him pay for his betrayal. Little did I know that Daniel had a few more tricks up his sleeve. The lawsuit was filed the following week. The media picked up the story, and it became a local sensation. Sibling rivalry turns ugly over inheritance, the headlines screamed. Daniel, of course, denied all the allegations, claiming that I was a disgruntled sister trying to extort money from him. He hired a high-powered public relations firm to spin the story in his favor, portraying himself as the victim of my irrational behavior. The legal battle was long and arduous. Daniel's lawyers filed motion after motion, trying to delay the proceedings and wear me down. They attacked my character, questioning my sanity and my motives. They even tried to subpoena my medical records, hoping to find something that would discredit me. But I refused to be intimidated. I stood my ground, fighting back with every weapon at my disposal. Aunt Carol was my secret weapon. She uncovered more evidence of Daniel's wrongdoing, tracking his hidden assets and exposing his lies about my mental health. She even managed to get a former business partner of Daniel's to testify against him, revealing his history of shady dealings and unethical behavior. The pressure was mounting on Daniel. The media was relentless, and his reputation was taking a beating. His friends and colleagues started to distance themselves from him, and his business ventures began to suffer. He was starting to crack. One evening, I received a phone call from Daniel. His voice was desperate, almost pleading. "Eleanor, we need to talk," he said. "This has gone too far. We're destroying our family." I hesitated. I didn't trust him, but I agreed to meet him, hoping that he had finally come to his senses. We met at a local diner, a neutral territory. Daniel looked haggard and worn. The stress of the lawsuit had taken its toll. "Eleanor, I'm sorry," he said, his voice trembling. "I made a mistake. I let my ambition get the better of me. I was wrong to lie about you, to try to take the inheritance for myself. I was wrong about everything." I stared at him in disbelief. Was this the same arrogant, selfish brother who had betrayed me so cruelly? "Do you mean it, Daniel?" I asked, my voice skeptical. "Or is this just another ploy?" "I mean it, Eleanor," he said, tears welling up in his eyes. "I've lost everything. My reputation, my friends, my business. I'm all alone. Please give me a chance to make amends." I listened to his apology, carefully weighing his words. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, the pain in his voice. But I couldn't forget the hurt he had caused me, the lies he had spread, the damage he had done to our family. "What do you want me to do, Daniel?" I asked. "How can you make things right?" "I'll drop the lawsuit," he said. "I'll confess everything to the court. I'll return the money I siphoned from the estate. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your forgiveness." I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to see him punished, to make him suffer for what he had done. But another part of me, the part that still loved him, wanted to believe that he could change, that he could become the brother I had once known. "Okay, Daniel," I said. "I'll give you a chance, but you have to do everything you promised. No more lies, no more manipulation. You have to be honest and transparent." He nodded eagerly, his eyes filled with hope. "I will, Eleanor," he said. "I promise, thank you." And so we reached a settlement. Daniel confessed to his wrongdoing, returned the stolen money, and apologized to our family. The lawsuit was dropped and the media frenzy subsided. It wasn't a perfect ending. The scars of Daniel's betrayal would always remain. But we had taken a step towards healing, towards rebuilding our relationship. I used my share of the inheritance to open my bookstore, a cozy haven filled with books, comfortable chairs, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. It was a dream come true, a place where I could share my love of literature with others. Daniel started attending therapy, working on his issues with ambition and entitlement. He slowly began to rebuild his life, focusing on his family and his community. It took time, but eventually he regained the trust of our family and friends. Our relationship was never the same, but it was stronger in some ways. We had both learned a valuable lesson about the importance of honesty, integrity, and the bonds of family. But the story doesn't end there. A few months after the settlement, I received a mysterious package in the mail. It was a thick envelope with no return address. I opened it cautiously, and inside I found a stack of documents. They were financial records detailing Daniel's secret investments and his hidden assets. It turned out that he had been lying to me. He hadn't returned all the money he had siphoned from the estate. He had stashed away millions of dollars in offshore accounts, hidden from the authorities and from me. I was furious. He had betrayed me again after promising to make amends. I felt like a fool for believing him, for giving him a second chance. But then I realized something. The documents weren't sent by Daniel. They were sent by someone who wanted to expose him, someone who knew about his hidden assets and wanted to see him brought to justice. I started to investigate, using my newfound skills and resources. I tracked the sender of the package, following a trail of clues that led me to a small town in Switzerland. There, I discovered a former employee of Daniel's, a woman who had been fired for refusing to participate in his illegal activities. She had been holding on to the documents for years, waiting for the right moment to expose him. She had heard about my lawsuit against Daniel and decided to send me the documents, hoping that I would use them to bring him down. I confronted Daniel with the new evidence. He denied everything at first, but when I showed him the documents, he broke down and confessed. He had been planning to disappear with the money, to start a new life in a foreign country. He had thought he could get away with it, but he had underestimated me. I turned the evidence over to the authorities and Daniel was arrested. He was charged with fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. He was facing a long prison sentence. This time, there would be no second chances. As I watched him being led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of closure. I had finally brought him to justice. I had avenged Nana Rose's memory and protected our family from his greed and his lies. But the victory was bittersweet. I had lost my brother, perhaps forever, but I had also found myself. I had discovered my strength, my courage, and my determination to fight for what was right, and I knew that Nana Rose would have been proud. What I didn't expect was the final twist. Years passed. I continued to run my bookstore, finding joy in sharing my love of reading with the community. My parents were doing well, enjoying their retirement and spending time with their grandchildren. Daniel remained in prison, serving his sentence. I visited him occasionally, offering him forgiveness and support. He seemed genuinely remorseful, finally understanding the consequences of his actions. One day, I received a letter from a lawyer in Switzerland. It turned out that Daniel had been secretly donating the money in his offshore accounts to a charitable foundation dedicated to helping underprivileged children. He had done it anonymously, not wanting to receive any credit for his actions. The lawyer informed me that Daniel had designated me as the executor of the foundation, giving me the power to decide how the money would be used. I was stunned. It was the last thing I expected. Daniel, the selfish and greedy brother who had betrayed me so cruelly, had performed an act of selfless generosity. I didn't know what to make of it. Was it a genuine attempt to make amends or just another manipulation? I decided to visit Daniel in prison. I confronted him with the letter, asking him why he had done it. He looked at me with a mixture of shame and hope. "I wanted to do something good with the money," he said. "Something that would honor Nana Rose's memory. I know I can never undo the wrong I've done, but I wanted to try to make a difference." I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deceit, but I saw only sincerity and remorse. I realized that he had truly changed. He had learned from his mistakes and was trying to use his resources to help others. I accepted his gift and took on the responsibility of managing the foundation. I worked with a team of dedicated professionals to ensure that the money was used wisely and effectively. We funded educational programs, provided medical care, and supported families in need. We made a real difference in the lives of countless children. And in a strange way, Daniel's actions helped to heal the wounds of our family. It showed us that even the most flawed individuals are capable of redemption, that even the darkest deeds can be transformed into acts of kindness. The inheritance that had once torn our family apart had ultimately brought us closer together, teaching us valuable lessons about forgiveness, compassion, and the enduring power of love. And so, my story comes to an end. It's a story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimately, redemption. It's a story about the complexities of family, the corrosive effects of greed, and the transformative power of forgiveness. It's a story that reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a better future. But the biggest twist of all, after Daniel was released from prison, he joined me in running the bookstore. He handled the finances, and his business acumen was invaluable. Together, we turned it into a thriving community hub, a place where everyone felt welcome and inspired. And sometimes, when things were quiet, I'd catch him reading to the children during story hour, his voice filled with warmth and enthusiasm. It was a sight I never thought I'd see, but it reminded me that even the most broken relationships can be mended, and that forgiveness is always possible, no matter how deep the wounds. It was a true happy ending, one that Nana Rose would have been proud of. And so, my life, once defined by the quiet solitude of the library and the sting of betrayal, had become something richer, something more meaningful than I could have ever imagined. It was a testament to the enduring power of family, the possibility of redemption, and the unexpected turns that life can take, even after the most bitter of revenge stories. But life, as it often does, had one more unexpected card to play. A few years later, just when I thought my life had settled into a comfortable rhythm of bookstore adventures and quiet evenings, a new player entered the scene, threatening the peace I had so carefully cultivated. It started subtly, with a series of anonymous online reviews targeting my bookstore. At first, I dismissed them as the work of disgruntled customers or internet trolls. Every business gets a few bad reviews, right? But these were different. They weren't just complaining about the coffee being cold or the prices being too high. They were personal, vicious attacks, questioning my competence, my integrity, and even my sanity. They accused me of being a fraud, a charlatan, a bookworm gone bad. The reviews were clearly coordinated, all using similar language and targeting the same aspects of my business. It was a deliberate smear campaign, designed to damage my reputation and drive away customers. As the reviews piled up, my sales started to decline. People were hesitant to visit my store, afraid of encountering the crazy librarian they had read about online. I felt like I was back in the dark days of Daniel's betrayal, my reputation being destroyed by lies and innuendo. But who was behind this? Who would want to hurt me after all this time? Daniel was still in prison, and as far as I knew, I had no other enemies. I confided in Aunt Carol, who was always up for a good mystery. She agreed to help me investigate, dusting off her private investigator skills and diving into the murky world of online anonymity. We started by tracing the internet protocol addresses of the reviewers, hoping to identify their physical locations. But they were all using virtual private networks and proxy servers, masking their true identities. It was like chasing ghosts. We then turned our attention to the content of the reviews, looking for clues that might reveal the reviewers' motives or connections. We analyzed the language they used, the topics they focused on, and the timing of their posts. And that's when we found something interesting. Several of the reviews mentioned specific details about my life, details that only a few people knew. They referred to my past struggles with Daniel, my dreams of opening a bookstore, and even my relationship with Nana Rose. It was clear that the reviewers were not random strangers. They were people who knew me, or at least knew about me. The list of possible suspects was short, but one name stood out: Evelyn Sterling. Evelyn was Daniel's ex-girlfriend, a woman who had always resented me. She had seen me as a threat, a rival for Daniel's affection. Even after Daniel's arrest, she had continued to harbor a grudge against me, blaming me for his downfall. I had always dismissed her as a jealous and spiteful woman, but I had never imagined that she would be capable of such a calculated act of revenge. I confronted Evelyn, presenting her with the evidence we had gathered. She denied everything at first, but when I showed her the analysis of the reviews, she broke down and confessed. She admitted that she had been behind the smear campaign, driven by her hatred and her desire to see me suffer. She had used fake accounts and proxy servers to hide her identity, carefully crafting each review to inflict maximum damage. I was shocked and disgusted. I couldn't believe that someone could hold on to so much anger and resentment for so long. I wanted to lash out at her, to make her pay for what she had done. But I knew that revenge wouldn't solve anything. It would only perpetuate the cycle of hatred and violence. Instead, I decided to take a different approach. I told Evelyn that I forgave her. I told her that I understood her pain and her anger. And I told her that I hoped she could find a way to move on with her life, to let go of the past and embrace a brighter future. My words seemed to have an effect on her. She was surprised by my forgiveness, expecting me to retaliate or seek revenge. She apologized for her actions, expressing remorse for the damage she had caused. She promised to remove the fake reviews and to stop harassing me. And to my surprise, she kept her word. The reviews disappeared, and the smear campaign came to an end. My sales started to recover, and my reputation was restored. I had overcome another challenge, not by seeking revenge, but by offering forgiveness. But what I didn't know was that Evelyn's actions had set something else in motion, something that would change my life in a way I never could have predicted. My act of forgiveness toward Evelyn, while seemingly concluding that chapter of negativity, unknowingly opened the door to an even more perplexing situation. Months after the online attacks ceased, I began noticing a pattern of peculiar incidents around the bookstore. Books would be misplaced, pages torn, and on several occasions, I found the front door unlocked in the mornings, even though I distinctly remembered locking it the night before. At first, I chalked it up to simple forgetfulness on my part or the occasional clumsy customer. But as the incidents became more frequent and deliberate, a sense of unease settled over me. It felt like someone was deliberately messing with my store, not to steal or vandalize, but to unsettle me. I installed security cameras, hoping to catch the culprit in the act. For weeks, the cameras recorded nothing out of the ordinary. Then one night, I reviewed the footage and saw something that sent a chill down my spine. A shadowy figure, cloaked in a hooded sweatshirt, entered the store after closing hours. The figure didn't steal anything or cause any major damage. Instead, they wandered through the aisles, touching the books, rearranging displays, and leaving behind small, cryptic notes tucked inside the pages. The notes were nonsensical, a jumble of words and symbols that seemed to have no meaning. I showed the footage to Aunt Carol, who was intrigued by the mystery. She suggested that the figure might be trying to communicate with me, using a code or a cipher that I needed to decipher. We spent hours trying to decode the notes, consulting books on cryptography and symbolism, but we couldn't make any sense of them. It was like the figure was speaking a language that no one understood. As the incidents continued, I started to feel increasingly paranoid. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering who was watching me and what they wanted. I started having nightmares, haunted by the image of the shadowy figure lurking in my bookstore. I confided in Daniel, who was now out of prison and working diligently at the bookstore. He was concerned about my well-being and offered to stay with me at night to provide security and support. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to burden him with my problems, especially after everything he had been through. But I was also scared and desperate for help. I accepted his offer, and for the next few weeks, Daniel stayed with me at the bookstore, sleeping on a makeshift bed in the back room. His presence brought me a sense of comfort and security. He was protective and vigilant, always on the lookout for any signs of trouble. But the incidents continued, even with Daniel's presence. The shadowy figure seemed to be taunting us, knowing that we were watching but still able to evade our grasp. One night, I woke up to find Daniel missing from his bed. I panicked, thinking that the shadowy figure had taken him. I searched the store frantically, calling his name. Finally, I found him in the front room, staring out the window at the street. He was pale and shaken, his eyes wide with fear. He told me that he had seen the shadowy figure standing across the street, staring back at him. The figure had been holding a sign, a single word written in large, bold letters. Guilty. The word sent a jolt of fear through me. It was clear that the shadowy figure knew about Daniel's past, about his crimes and his imprisonment. They were using his guilt to torment him, to remind him of his past mistakes. I realized that the incidents at the bookstore were not just about me. They were also about Daniel, about his redemption and his struggle to overcome his past. The shadowy figure was not just a random vandal or a deranged stalker. They were someone who knew us, someone who wanted to punish us for our past sins. But who was it? And what did they want? The note left that night, however, revealed a crucial clue, something that would soon change everything. The word guilty, scrawled on that sign, felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just about Daniel's past. It felt like a judgment on both of us, on our entire family. We were being haunted, not by a ghost, but by the embodiment of our shared history, our mistakes, and our attempts at redemption. Aunt Carol, ever the pragmatist, suggested we focus on the practical. Someone knows your history intimately, she said, her eyes narrowed in thought. This isn't some random act. We need to revisit the past, see who might still hold a grudge. We started by looking into individuals who had been affected by Daniel's crimes. Former business partners, disgruntled investors, people he had wronged along the way. The list was longer than I cared to admit, but none of them seemed to fit the profile of our shadowy figure. They were either too old, too far away, or simply lacked the motive or the means to carry out such a bizarre campaign of psychological terror. Then, Aunt Carol had an idea. "What about Evelyn?" she asked. "She seemed awfully quick to disappear after you forgave her." "Maybe this is her twisted way of getting back at you both." I hesitated. Evelyn had seemed genuinely remorseful, but I couldn't deny that she was still a prime suspect. We decided to pay her a visit, hoping to get some answers. We found her living in a small apartment on the other side of town, working as a waitress. She seemed surprised to see us, but she invited us in. We confronted her with our suspicions, telling her about the shadowy figure and the guilty sign. She vehemently denied any involvement. "I swear, Alina, I wouldn't do anything to hurt you or Daniel," she said, her eyes pleading. "I made a mistake and I'm trying to move on with my life. I would never go back to that dark place." I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. Aunt Carol, ever the perceptive observer, noticed a flicker of anxiety in her eyes, a slight tremor in her voice. We left Evelyn's apartment feeling uncertain and frustrated. We were no closer to identifying our shadowy figure, and the incidents at the bookstore continued, growing increasingly unsettling. One night, I found my Nana Rose's favorite rocking chair, the one I kept in a quiet corner of the store, rocking gently back and forth, even though no one was there. It was as if her spirit was trying to communicate with me, to warn me about something. Desperate for answers, I decided to consult a psychic, a woman named Madame Esmeralda who claimed to have the ability to communicate with the spirit world. I was skeptical, but I was willing to try anything at this point. Madame Esmeralda held my hands, closed her eyes, and began to chant in a low, rhythmic voice. After a few minutes, she gasped and opened her eyes, staring at me with a look of fear. "I see a dark shadow," she said, her voice trembling. "It's connected to your past, to a betrayal that runs deep within your family. The shadow wants revenge, but not just on you. It wants to destroy everything you hold dear." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I see a name," she said. "A name that is both familiar and forgotten. The name is Rose." My heart skipped a beat. Rose was my Nana's name. What did she mean? Was my own grandmother's memory somehow tied to the shadowy figure? Was I fighting something connected to Nana Rose's past? The possibility was both absurd and terrifying, but it gave me a new direction to consider. The idea that Nana Rose's name was tied to this felt bizarre, but it unlocked a memory, a whispered story my mother had told me years ago, about a falling out between Nana Rose and her sister, Carol, years before I was born. Something about a man and a broken promise. Could it be that the source of all this torment came not from my generation, but from a past that predated even Daniel's mistakes? The thought hung in the air, heavy and ominous. The revelation that the name Rose was connected to the shadowy figure sent a shiver down my spine. It was like a missing piece of a puzzle, suddenly revealing a hidden layer of complexity. The whispered story my mother had told me years ago about a rift between Nana Rose and Aunt Carol began to resurface in my mind. Something about a man and a broken promise. Could it be that the source of our torment stemmed from a decades-old family feud? I decided to confront Aunt Carol to ask her about her relationship with Nana Rose and the mysterious falling out. I found her in her apartment, surrounded by stacks of files and old photographs. She seemed surprised to see me, but she welcomed me in with a warm smile. "Aunt Carol," I said, my voice hesitant, "I need to ask you about something about Nana Rose." Her smile faded, and her eyes clouded over with a hint of sadness. "What about Rose?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I told her about Madame Esmeralda's vision and the connection to the name Rose. I also mentioned the story my mother had told me about their falling out. Aunt Carol listened patiently, her expression growing more and more somber. When I finished, she sighed and shook her head. "It's true, Alina," she said. "Rose and I had a falling out many years ago. It was over a man we both loved." She paused, her eyes filling with tears. "His name was James," she said. "He was a kind and gentle soul, a musician with a heart of gold. Rose and I both fell in love with him, but he chose her. I was heartbroken, but I tried to be happy for them. But then, something happened that changed everything." She took a deep breath and continued. "James was drafted into the army during the Korean War. Before he left, he promised me that he would come back, that he would leave Rose and be with me. He said that he had made a mistake, that he truly loved me, not her." I believed him. I waited for him day after day, year after year, but he never came back. He died in battle, leaving Rose a widow. She paused again, her voice choked with emotion. "I blamed Rose for his death," she said. I believed that if she hadn't married him, he wouldn't have gone to war. I hated her for taking him away from me. I was shocked by her confession. I had never known about this dark chapter in her life. I had always seen her as a strong and independent woman, but now I realized that she had been carrying a heavy burden of grief and resentment for decades. But Aunt Carol, I said, that was so long ago. Why would someone be bringing this up now? Why would someone be tormenting us with it? She shook her head. I don't know, Alina, she said, but I have a feeling that it's connected to James. Maybe someone who knew him, someone who wants to avenge his death. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. It was possible that someone was still harboring a grudge against Nana Rose, even after all these years. But who? And how were they connected to the shadowy figure who was haunting us? As Aunt Carol and I sat in silence, trying to unravel the mystery, a new idea began to form in my mind. What if the shadowy figure wasn't seeking revenge on Nana Rose, but on Aunt Carol? What if they were trying to punish her for her role in James' death? The possibility was unsettling, but it made a strange kind of sense. Aunt Carol had been carrying a burden of guilt for decades, and perhaps someone felt that she deserved to pay for her sins. I looked at her, her face etched with sadness and regret. I realized that she was just as much a victim in this situation as I was. We were both being haunted by the ghosts of the past, trapped in a cycle of pain and resentment. But how could we break free? How could we stop the shadowy figure from tormenting us? I knew that we had to confront the past, to uncover the truth about James' death and the events that had led to the rift between Nana Rose and Aunt Carol. But how could we do that, after all this time? The trail had gone cold decades ago, and there was no guarantee that we would find any answers. But I was determined to try. I knew that if we didn't confront the past, it would continue to haunt us, poisoning our present and threatening our future. And then it hit me. There was one person who might know the truth about James' death. Someone who had been there, someone who had witnessed the events firsthand. Someone who was still alive. My mind raced as the realization struck me. James' best friend, a man named Arthur Jenkins, was still alive. Aunt Carol had mentioned him in passing, describing him as a loyal and dependable friend who had served alongside James in the Korean War. According to her, Arthur had been deeply affected by James' death, carrying the burden of survivor's guilt for many years. He had moved away from Maine after the war, seeking a fresh start in California. Aunt Carol had lost touch with him over the years, but she remembered his last known address. I knew that finding Arthur was a long shot, but it was the only lead we had. I convinced Aunt Carol to join me on a trip to California, hoping that we could persuade Arthur to share his memories of James and the events surrounding his death. We booked our flights and packed our bags, preparing for a journey into the unknown. When we arrived in California, we tracked down Arthur's address. It was a small, unassuming house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. We approached the house cautiously, unsure of what to expect. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. An elderly man with a kind face and weary eyes answered the door. It was Arthur. He seemed surprised to see us, but he invited us in. We introduced ourselves and explained the reason for our visit. We told him about the shadowy figure, the cryptic notes, and the connection to the name Rose. We asked him if he knew anything about the falling out between Nana Rose and Aunt Carol and about the circumstances surrounding James' death. Arthur listened patiently, his expression growing more and more troubled. When we finished, he sighed and shook his head. "I'm sorry to hear about all this," he said. "It sounds like you're going through a lot." He paused, his eyes clouding over with a hint of sadness. "James was a good man," he said. "He didn't deserve to die, and Rose and Carol, they were both good women. It's a tragedy that they let a man come between them." I pressed him for more details, asking him about James' feelings for Rose and Carol, and about the promise he had made to Aunt Carol before he went to war. Arthur hesitated, reluctant to reveal too much, but I could see that he knew more than he was letting on. Finally, I appealed to his sense of justice, urging him to tell us the truth, no matter how painful it might be. "Arthur," I said, "we need your help. Someone is trying to hurt us, to destroy our lives. We believe that it's connected to James and the events that happened during the war. Please tell us what you know. It could save us." My words seemed to have an effect on him. He looked at me, his eyes filled with compassion. He realized that we were desperate for answers and that he was the only one who could provide them. He took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice trembling with emotion. "James loved both Rose and Carol," he said. He was torn between them, unsure of who he truly wanted to be with. But he married Rose because she was pregnant. He felt obligated to do the right thing to provide for his child, but he never stopped loving Carol. He paused, his voice cracking with emotion. Before we went to war, James told me that he had made a mistake. He said that he should have married Carol, that she was the one he truly loved. He asked me to deliver a letter to Carol, in case he didn't make it back. The letter contained his true feelings for her and a promise that he would leave Rose and be with her if he survived. I was stunned by his revelation. James had never stopped loving Aunt Carol, even after he had married Nana Rose. He had made a promise to her, a promise that he had intended to keep. But he had died before he had the chance, leaving a trail of broken hearts and shattered dreams. "Did you deliver the letter, Arthur?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He shook his head. "No," he said. "I couldn't do it. I knew that it would destroy Rose, to learn that James had never truly loved her. I couldn't bring myself to cause her that much pain. So I burned the letter, keeping James' secret hidden for all these years." His confession hung in the air, heavy with regret and remorse. Arthur had made a choice that had altered the course of history. He had protected Nana Rose from the truth, but he had also denied Aunt Carol the chance to find closure and move on with her life. And now, years later, someone was using his secret to torment us, to punish us for the sins of the past. But who? And how had they learned about the letter? As Arthur and I sat in silence, trying to make sense of the situation, Aunt Carol suddenly spoke up, her voice filled with realization. "It's Margaret," she said. "James and Rose's daughter, my niece." The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Margaret, my own cousin, Nana Rose's daughter, had been the shadowy figure all along. It seemed impossible, yet it made a twisted kind of sense. She had always been a quiet, reserved woman, seemingly content with her life. But beneath the surface, she had been harboring a deep-seated resentment, fueled by the secrets and lies that had shaped her family's history. Aunt Carol explained that Margaret had always idolized her father, James. She had grown up hearing stories about his bravery and his kindness, never knowing the truth about his unrequited love for Aunt Carol. When Nana Rose had passed away, Margaret had inherited her mother's personal belongings, including a hidden diary that revealed James' true feelings for Aunt Carol and the promise he had made to her before he went to war. The discovery had shattered Margaret's world. She had felt betrayed by her parents, by her entire family. She had become consumed by a burning desire for revenge, wanting to punish those who had wronged her father and kept the truth hidden for so long. She had started by targeting Daniel, knowing about his past crimes and his attempt to defraud me of my inheritance. She had seen him as a symbol of greed and corruption, a stain on the family name. Then, she had turned her attention to me, seeing me as a naive and gullible fool who had been easily manipulated by Daniel. She had launched the online smear campaign, hoping to destroy my reputation and ruin my life. But when I had forgiven Evelyn, Margaret had realized that her plan was failing. She had needed to escalate her tactics, to find a way to inflict more pain and suffering. That's when she had learned about James' secret letter and Arthur's decision to burn it. She had seen it as the ultimate betrayal, a conspiracy to keep the truth hidden from her and her mother. She had decided to use it to torment Aunt Carol, to remind her of her role in James' death and the pain she had caused Nana Rose. The cryptic notes, the rearranged books, the rocking chair, it had all been part of her elaborate plan to drive us to the brink of despair. I couldn't believe that Margaret, my own cousin, was capable of such cruelty and deception. I had always thought of her as a kind and gentle soul, someone who would never intentionally hurt anyone. But now I realized that I had never truly known her. She had been hiding her true self behind a mask of normalcy, waiting for the right moment to unleash her fury. Aunt Carol and I decided to confront Margaret, to give her a chance to explain her actions and to make amends for the pain she had caused. We found her at her home, a small cottage nestled in the woods. She seemed surprised to see us, but she invited us in. We confronted her with our knowledge of her actions, revealing that we knew about the diary, the letter, and her role as the shadowy figure. She didn't deny anything. She confessed to everything, her voice filled with bitterness and resentment. "You ruined my life," she said, her eyes blazing with anger. "You kept the truth hidden from me for so long. You made me believe that my parents were perfect, that they had a perfect marriage. But it was all a lie. My father never loved my mother. He loved you, Carol, and you took him away from her." Aunt Carol tried to reason with her, explaining that James' death had been a tragedy for everyone, that no one was to blame. But Margaret wouldn't listen. She was too consumed by her anger and her pain. "I hate you," she said, her voice trembling with rage. I hate you all. I want you to suffer the way I've suffered. I realized that there was no reaching her. She was too far gone, too consumed by her desire for revenge. We left her cottage feeling defeated and disheartened. We had uncovered the truth, but it had only made things worse. Margaret was still out there, consumed by her hatred and determined to make us pay. I knew that we couldn't let her get away with it. We had to find a way to stop her, to protect ourselves and our family from her wrath. I looked at Aunt Carol, her face etched with sadness and regret. I realized that this was her battle, too. She had been carrying a burden of guilt for decades, and now she had a chance to confront her past and to make amends for her mistakes. I knew that together, we could find a way to overcome Margaret's hatred and to break free from the cycle of revenge. But how? How could we stop someone who was so consumed by anger and so determined to destroy us? I glanced down at Aunt Carol's hands, clasped tightly in her lap. She was staring out the window, lost in thought. And then I saw it. On her left hand, she wore a ring. A simple gold band with a small inscription on the inside. I recognized it instantly. It was James' ring. The ring he had given her before he went to war. The ring that she had kept hidden for all these years. An idea began to form in my mind. A way to use the ring to bring Margaret to justice and to finally bring peace to our family. The sight of James' ring on Aunt Carol's finger sparked an idea. A risky plan that could potentially end the cycle of hatred and bring Margaret to justice. I realized that the ring, a symbol of James' love for Aunt Carol, could be used to confront Margaret with the truth and to expose her lies. I proposed my plan to Aunt Carol, explaining that we needed to lure Margaret into a trap, to create a situation where she would be forced to reveal her true self. I suggested that we stage a fake memorial service for James, inviting Margaret and other members of the family to attend. During the service, Aunt Carol would wear James' ring, making it clear that she had always been the true love of his life. We would then wait and see how Margaret reacted, hoping that she would reveal her hand and expose her true motives. Aunt Carol was hesitant at first, worried that my plan was too risky and that it could backfire. But I convinced her that it was the only way to stop Margaret and to finally bring peace to our family. We began to make preparations for the memorial service, working in secret to avoid arousing Margaret's suspicions. We contacted other members of the family, explaining that we wanted to honor James' memory and to bring closure to the past. We carefully chose the location for the service, selecting a small chapel in the woods, a place that held special meaning for Aunt Carol and Nana Rose. As the day of the memorial service approached, I felt a growing sense of anxiety and apprehension. I knew that we were playing a dangerous game and that there was a lot at stake. If Margaret discovered our plan, she could retaliate in unpredictable ways. But I was determined to see it through, to bring her to justice and to end the cycle of hatred once and for all. On the day of the memorial service, the chapel was filled with family members and friends, all gathered to pay their respects to James' memory. Aunt Carol and I stood at the front of the chapel, greeting the guests as they arrived. When Margaret arrived, I noticed that she seemed unusually tense and nervous. She avoided eye contact with me and Aunt Carol, and she kept her distance from the other guests. As the service began, I watched Margaret carefully, looking for any signs that she was about to snap. Aunt Carol delivered a heartfelt eulogy for James,